I came home with severe combat injuries. My husband filed for divorce before I had fully recovered, leaving me alone with our 4-month-old son. He walked out with his mistress without a second thought. 7 years later, he sued me for full custody. But when the judge read a single line from my military record, my ex-husband suddenly turned pale and muttered that it was impossible. My name is Clara. I am 34. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight back against a toxic person who underestimated your true worth. A heavy medical file slammed onto the desk of Judge Mitchell. The loud thud echoed through the silent courtroom. I sat perfectly still in my cheap gray suit. Across the aisle, my ex-husband Jason leaned back in his expensive designer jacket. He flashed an arrogant smirk. "Your Honor." Jason spoke up, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I am requesting full custody of my son Mason, effective immediately. My ex-wife is a disabled veteran. She is unemployed. She lives on government assistance. She has a permanent leg injury from her time in the military. She cannot even run after a 7-year-old boy, let alone provide him with a secure future. I am the CEO of a thriving tech startup. I can give Mason the whole world. Clara can barely give him a roof over his head." I stared at his perfectly groomed face. Betrayal. He always betrayed me. Betrayal when I lay in the recovery ward at Walter Reed Hospital with my leg wrapped in surgical gauze. Betrayal when he threw divorce papers onto my hospital bed instead of holding our 4-month-old son. Betrayal when he emptied our joint savings account to rent a luxury apartment for his mistress Madison while I was fighting off infections. And now he wanted to steal the only thing that kept me breathing. He wanted to take my son. Judge Mitchell adjusted his glasses. He looked down at the massive file Jason had just submitted. "This is an extensive medical report. It details severe physical limitations. Miss Clara, how do you respond to the claim that your physical disability prevents you from actively parenting your son?" My attorney started to stand up. I put my hand on his arm and gently pushed him back down into his chair. I did not need a proxy. I did not need someone to speak for me. I stood up. "Your Honor." I began, my voice steady and void of the tears Jason expected. "The medical report my ex-husband just provided is 7 years old. It details my condition immediately following an explosive blast during deployment. I spent 2 years in physical therapy learning how to walk again. Jason would not know anything about my recovery because he never attended a single medical appointment. He was too busy spending my military hazard pay on vacations with his mistress." Jason jumped out of his chair. His face flushed bright red. "That is a lie. I tried to support her, but her mental state was completely unhinged. She is dangerous." I did not raise my voice. I simply looked at the judge. "He stole my military insurance payout while I was in a coma. I stated the facts clearly. He drained $80,000 meant for my reconstructive surgeries and used it as seed money for his tech startup. Jason did not pay a single cent of child support for the first 5 years of Mason life. He only suddenly cares about being a father now because his company is trying to secure a public image for a new investor rollout." Judge Mitchell frowned deeply. He glared at Jason. "Is there any truth to this accusation regarding the stolen funds?" Jason waved his hand dismissively, trying to recover his composure. "Your Honor, my ex-wife is deeply unwell. She suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. She hallucinates these conspiracies because she cannot handle reality. I did not steal anything. In fact, I have a document right here that proves she has been legally incompetent for years." Jason reached into his leather briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of paper inside a plastic sleeve. He walked it over to the judge bench with a stride. Madison, sitting in the gallery behind him, let out a mocking laugh. I kept my eyes locked on Jason. "Your Honor," Jason said, his voice ringing with triumph. "That document is a surrender of parental rights. Clara signed it 7 years ago. She voluntarily gave up all legal claims to Mason because she knew she was too mentally unstable to be a mother. She admitted she was a danger to him. I am simply enforcing the agreement she made." The courtroom grew quiet. Judge Mitchell picked up the document. He examined the signature at the bottom of the page. He looked back at me, his expression tightening into a grim line. Miss Clara, the judge said, his tone dropping an octave. This document bears your signature. It is dated October 15th, 7 years ago. It clearly states you surrender full legal and physical custody due to incapacity. Did you sign this paper? I looked at the document in the judge hand. I recognized the ink. I recognized the sharp curve of my own handwriting. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my face to remain a mask of cold stone. I knew exactly what that paper was. I knew exactly how he had gotten my signature. I remembered the heavy, suffocating fog of post-operative painkillers. I remembered Jason handing me a clipboard in the dark hospital room, telling me it was just a routine financial waiver to pay for my next surgery. He had drugged me. He had lied to me. He had manipulated a wounded soldier in a hospital bed. I took a slow step forward. My prosthetic leg clicked softly against the polished hardwood floor of the courtroom. Click, step, click, step. I did not rush. I let the silence hang in the air. I let Jason sweat. I walked directly to the judge's bench. I did not ask for permission. I reached out and took the plastic sleeve from Judge Mitchell's hand. I stared at the document. It was a standard Department of Family Services form. The black ink at the bottom was unmistakably mine. The sharp slant of the letter C. The heavy pressure on the A. It was my signature. Jason crossed his arms. He leaned back in his chair with a smug grin. He thought he had won. He thought he had cornered a wounded animal. He thought I would break down and cry. He was wrong. I looked up at the judge. My voice was calm. My voice was ice. This is my signature, Your Honor. I do not deny the ink, but I absolutely deny the context. Jason snorted loudly. What context? You signed away your rights, Clara. You knew you were unfit. You are still unfit. I ignored him. I kept my eyes locked on the judge. I tapped my index finger against the date printed next to my signature. I tapped it once. I tapped it twice. I tapped it a third time. Look at the date. Your Honor. October 15th, 7 years ago. Do you know where I was on October 15th? I was not in a lawyer's office. I was not sitting at a kitchen table making decisions about my son. I was lying in the intensive care unit at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. I was hooked to a ventilator. I was pumped full of painkillers. I was fighting a massive staph infection in my amputated limb. I was fighting for my life. I was fighting for my future. I was fighting the darkness. I was fighting the terror. I was fighting just to open my eyes. Judge Mitchell leaned forward. He peered closely at the document. He looked back at me. Miss Clara, are you alleging that your ex-husband forced you to sign a legal document while you were heavily medicated? I am alleging much more than that, Your Honor. I turned to look at Jason. His smug grin had vanished. A thin layer of sweat coated his forehead. He knew exactly what he did. He knew exactly what kind of monster he was. He came into my hospital room at 3 in the morning. He bypassed the nursing station. He bypassed the visitor log. He stood over my bed holding a clipboard. I remember the smell of his expensive cologne mixing with the smell of hospital bleach. I remember the cold metal of the pen he forced into my trembling hand. He told me it was a financial waiver. He told me it was required by my military insurance to authorize an emergency skin graft procedure. He said my leg would rot if I did not sign it. He said I would die if I did not sign it. He said our son would be an orphan if I did not sign it. Objection, Jason's lawyer shouted, jumping to his feet. These are baseless and defamatory accusations. She has no proof of this interaction. I turned the document over. I slid it out of the plastic sleeve. I held the crisp white paper up to the bright fluorescent lights of the courtroom. Look closely at the top left corner, Your Honor. Look at the staple holes. There are 3 distinct sets of staple holes in this single sheet of paper. But the document Jason just handed you is only a 2-page form. Why would a 2-page form have 3 sets of staple holes? I will tell you why. Because this signature page was originally attached to a 40-page medical financial release. Jason removed the staple. Jason detached my signature page. Jason reattached it to a forged custody surrender form. Jason committed fraud. Jason committed perjury. Jason committed a federal offense right here in your courtroom. The silence in the room was absolute. The court reporter stopped typing. The bailiff shifted his hand toward his heavy radio. Judge Mitchell took the paper from my hand. He held it up to the light. He saw the holes. He saw the truth. His face darkened with sudden furious anger. "Mr. Jason," Judge Mitchell said, his voice rumbling like thunder, "do you have an explanation for the physical tampering of a legal document submitted to this court?" Jason stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. He was panicking. His eyes darted around the room looking for an exit. He looked at his lawyer. His lawyer took a very deliberate step away from him. Jason realized he was completely alone. So he attacked. "She is crazy!" Jason yelled, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "She is totally delusional. Listen to her. Listen to these paranoid fantasies. She thinks everyone is out to get her. The war scrambled her brain. The bombs ruined her mind. She suffers from severe trauma and she refuses to get help. She is standing here spinning wild conspiracy theories about swapped pages and hospital ambushes because she cannot accept reality. She is unfit to be a mother. She is unfit to be in society. She is a broken, disabled soldier who belongs in a psychiatric ward, not a courtroom." He was breathing heavily. He gripped the edge of his table, trying to anchor himself. He thought volume would replace facts. He thought anger would replace evidence. He thought he could bully the judge the same way he used to bully me. I did not flinch. I did not blink. I stood perfectly still. Let him dig his own grave. Let him scream. Let him expose his own desperate lies. "She is dangerous," Jason continued, turning to the gallery to seek an audience. "She snaps at any moment. You cannot give my son to a woman who hallucinates enemies everywhere. She is violent. She is a ticking time bomb." Judge Mitchell raised his wooden gavel. "Mr. Jason, I suggest you lower your voice and address the bench directly, or I will hold you in contempt. I am ordering an immediate forensic examination of this document. If what Miss Clara says is true, you will be leaving this courthouse in handcuffs." Jason swallowed hard. His face was pale. The trap was closing around him, and he could feel the cold steel biting into his ankles. He opened his mouth to speak, but someone else beat him to it. From the back row of the gallery, the heavy wooden doors swung shut. Madison jumped to her feet. She was wearing a tight designer dress paid for with my stolen money. She clutched a gold smartphone in her manicured hand. "He is telling the truth!" Madison screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "She is dangerous. She is a violent psycho, and I can prove it right now. I have video evidence. I have a recording of her physically attacking a parent at Mason's school. I have it right here on my phone." The courtroom erupted into loud whispers. Madison stood tall, waving her phone like a weapon. She thought she was the savior. She thought she was the hero. She thought she had won. She had no idea she had just walked straight into my crosshairs. Madison marched past the wooden railing dividing the gallery from the courtroom floor. She did not wait for permission. She tapped her screen and aimed the device toward the judge. The tinny audio of her phone echoed off the mahogany walls. It was my voice. I sounded breathless. I sounded enraged. I sounded exactly like the violent veteran Jason was trying to paint me as. The video showed me grabbing Jason by the lapels of his expensive suit. I shoved him hard against the side of his luxury SUV. I was screaming at him. My face was flushed. My hair was disheveled. The camera angle was tight. It only showed the two of us standing next to his car. "Look at her," Madison shouted, her voice vibrating with fake terror. "Look at this animal. This was just last month. Jason was simply trying to pick up Mason from a weekend school event and she attacked him like a wild dog. How can you leave a child with a woman who snaps like this?" Judge Mitchell leaned over his bench. His face darkened. He stared at the screen and then looked down at me. The air in the courtroom grew heavy. Jason adjusted his tie and put on a mask of pure victimization. He looked down at the floor as if he was traumatized by the memory. "Miss Clara," the judge said, his voice completely devoid of the sympathy he had shown me just moments ago. "This video is highly disturbing. Unprovoked physical violence against your ex-husband is grounds for immediate termination of custody. Do you have anything to say for yourself before I call social services?" I did not need to say a word. A tall, broad-shouldered African-American man stood up from the second row of the gallery. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. His posture commanded instant respect. It was Jamal. My sister Rachel sat right next to him, watching with a calm, calculating smile. Jamal walked forward with the quiet authority of a man who spent his life making life-or-death decisions. "Your Honor," Jamal spoke. His voice was a rich, deep baritone that instantly silenced the murmurs in the room. "I can provide the exact context for this video." Judge Mitchell scowled. "And who exactly are you, sir? You cannot simply interrupt my courtroom." Jamal did not flinch. He stood tall and confident. "My name is Dr. Jamal Vance. I am the Chief of Pediatric Surgery at Memorial Hospital. I am also Clara brother-in-law. I am the physician who treated her immediately following the incident shown in that highly manipulated video." Jason jumped up. "He is family. He is biased. You cannot listen to him. He is just covering for this crazy woman." Judge Mitchell banged his gavel. He ordered Jason to sit down and keep his mouth shut. The judge looked at Jamal and told him to proceed. Jamal stepped up to the railing. He looked at Madison with clinical disgust. "The video this woman just played is cropped. It intentionally cuts out the 4-lane intersection directly behind Jason's SUV. It also cuts out the timeline of what happened exactly 30 seconds prior." Jamal turned his attention back to the bench. It was a Saturday afternoon. Jason was supposed to be supervising Mason at a school fundraiser. Instead, Jason was standing by his car texting his mistress. He left the passenger door open. He left his 7-year-old son completely unattended. Mason saw a stray dog across the street. He wandered away from the car and stepped right into the intersection. The courtroom fell dead silent. Madison lowered her phone. Her hand began to shake. Clara was walking out of the school building when she saw it happen. Jamal continued, his voice ringing with absolute clarity. A delivery truck was speeding down the avenue. The driver did not see the child. Jason did not see the child because he was staring at his screen. Clara did not hesitate. She sprinted across 50 yards of asphalt on a carbon fiber prosthetic leg. She dove directly into oncoming traffic. She threw her body into the side of the truck to shove Mason out of the way. She saved that boy life while his father was busy planning a hotel rendezvous. Jason was pale. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. The air seemed to leave his lungs completely. When Clara shoved Jason against that car in the video, Jamal said, pointing a long finger at my ex-husband, she had just pulled their son out from under a set of tires. She shoved him because he finally looked up from his phone and asked her why she was making such a big deal out of nothing. She was running on adrenaline and sheer terror. Any mother in this room would have done the exact same thing. I watched the judge face. The anger directed at me evaporated. It was replaced by a furious, burning glare aimed straight at Jason. "I know all of this because I treated them in the emergency room," Jamal stated. Mason had a scraped knee from hitting the pavement. Clara suffered 2 bruised ribs, a severe laceration on her shoulder, and a cracked prosthetic socket from the impact of the truck bumper. I submitted the medical imaging and the police report to the bailiff this morning. I also submitted the unedited traffic camera footage from the intersection. It shows the entire event from start to finish. The bailiff handed a manila envelope to the judge. Judge Mitchell ripped it open. He pulled out the police report and a flash drive. He glared at Madison. "You brought manipulated evidence into my courtroom to frame a mother who risked her life for her child." Judge Mitchell said, his voice trembling with rage. "You stand there and call her a violent animal." Madison took a step back. She looked at Jason for help. Jason stared straight ahead, completely paralyzed by his own unfolding destruction. He had nothing left to say. His lies were stripped away. His forged documents were exposed. His manipulated videos were debunked by a respected medical professional. Judge Mitchell picked up his gavel. He looked ready to throw Jason and Madison into a holding cell right then and there. I am striking this video from the record, the judge announced, and I am strongly considering having the two of you arrested for evidence tampering and perjury. I stood tall. I looked at Jason. He was finally experiencing the terror he had put me through for 7 years. I wanted him to feel every single second of it. I wanted him to realize he had lost. But before the judge could strike the gavel, the heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom slammed open. They hit the walls with a loud crack. Everyone turned around. An older woman marched down the center aisle. She wore a gaudy pearl necklace and a furious expression. It was Susan, Jason's mother. She was practically vibrating with rage. She ignored the bailiff stepping toward her. She ignored the judge demanding order. "Do not listen to a word that man says," Susan screamed, pointing a manicured finger directly at Jamal. "He is a liar. They are all liars. They are trying to steal my grandson." Judge Mitchell slammed his gavel repeatedly. "Madam, you will halt right there or I will have you removed by force." Susan ignored him. She marched straight up to the wooden partition. She reached into her oversized designer handbag. She pulled out a thick stack of medical files stamped with a red urgent label. She slammed them onto the barrier. "I have the real truth right here," Susan yelled, her voice shrill and desperate. "You think she is a hero. You think she is a good mother. I have the pediatric nutritional reports right here in my hand. They prove that Clara is neglecting her child. She is starving my grandson. Mason is severely malnourished and I have the medical records to prove she is unfit to keep him for another day." Judge Mitchell slammed his gavel so hard the wooden handle cracked against the sound block. "Order. I will have order in this court, or I will hold everyone in this gallery in criminal contempt." The bailiff lunged forward, grabbing Susan by the arm. She violently wrenched herself free. Her pearl necklace snapped, scattering white beads across the polished floor. "I demand grandparents' rights right now!" Susan shrieked, kicking a stray pearl out of her way. "My son is too soft on this woman. Clara is a monster. She feeds my grandson processed trash. Look at these reports. He is severely malnourished. He is underweight. I will not let this psychotic veteran starve my bloodline. I am petitioning for emergency temporary custody today." Jamal stepped in front of my table, blocking Susan from seeing me. He addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I am Mason, primary care physician. I have his actual medical records from Memorial Hospital. Mason is in the 80th percentile for height and weight. The documents this woman is waving around are completely fabricated." Susan lunged at Jamal. She pointed her finger directly at his chest. "You are lying to protect her. You are not even real family. You married into this disaster." Jason grabbed his mother by the shoulder and yanked her back. He realized the judge was 1 second away from calling for armed backup. "Mom, shut up," Jason hissed. "You are ruining everything." Judge Mitchell's face was purple with fury. He pointed his gavel at Jason. "You have completely lost control of your counsel, your witnesses, and your family. Mr. Jason, I am ordering a 15-minute recess. When I return to this bench, I expect everyone to be seated and silent, or I will start issuing arrest warrants. Do I make myself clear?" The judge stood up and stormed out of the courtroom. The heavy wooden doors slammed behind him, shutting with a deafening thud. The moment the judge left the room, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive silence was replaced by the frantic whispering of lawyers. Jason pushed his mother toward the gallery benches. He told Madison to sit down and keep her mouth shut. Then he straightened his tie. He rolled his shoulders back. He put on his best corporate face. He walked slowly across the aisle and stopped directly in front of my table. Jamal moved to intercept him, but I raised my hand. I signaled Jamal to let him speak. Jason looked down at me. His eyes were cold and very calculating. "Clara, we need to end this circus right now," Jason said, lowering his voice so the bailiff could not hear. "You are embarrassing yourself. You are embarrassing our son. You brought your sister husband in here to spin some heroic fairy tale about a traffic accident, but the judge still has your signature on that medical release form. He still has the fact that you are a disabled, unemployed veteran. You cannot win a war of attrition against me." I stared at him. I did not blink. I did not speak. Jason reached inside his tailored jacket. He pulled out a sleek leather checkbook. He unscrewed a gold fountain pen. He scribbled a number on the paper and tore the check from the binding. He slid it across the wooden table. The paper stopped right in front of my hands. I looked down. $10,000. Take the money, Clara Jason whispered, leaning his knuckles on my table. $10,000. That is more than you make in a year on your pathetic military disability checks. I am offering you a clean exit. Drop your custody defense. Walk away from Mason today. If you do, I will tell my lawyer to drop the psychological evaluation request. I will not force you to sit in front of a court-appointed shrink and relive your little war trauma. Take the money and go buy yourself a cheap apartment somewhere far away from my family. I looked from the check to his eyes. You think $10,000 buys my son? Jason let out a harsh, arrogant laugh. I think $10,000 is a generous gift to a woman who has absolutely nothing. You do not understand what you are up against, Clara. I just closed a massive government defense logistics contract. I secured $20 million from the Department of Defense. I am untouchable. My company is about to go public. I have investors backing me who could buy and sell this entire courthouse. If you fight me, I will drag this custody battle out for 20 years. I will file motion after motion. I will hire 5 more lawyers. I will bury you in legal debt. Take the buyout. It is the only victory you will get today. Madison stood up from the gallery. She walked over and wrapped her arm around Jason's waist. She sneered at me. Just take the money, Clara. Jason is being nice to you. We have a vacation to Aspen to catch, and you are wasting our time. I looked at the check. I did not raise my voice. I did not show an ounce of the rage burning inside my chest. I slowly extended my right index finger. I placed it on the center of the check. I pushed the piece of paper right back across the polished wood. It stopped against Jason's knuckles. I calmly reached down into my leather briefcase. I bypassed the standard legal documents. I pulled out a single bright red folder stamped with a federal seal. I placed the red folder on the table. It was the only thing I needed to completely destroy his entire life. I looked Jason dead in the eyes. I suggest you open your banking application right now, Jason. Check your primary corporate banking accounts. Check your hidden personal savings accounts. Check the offshore accounts you put in Madison's name. You cannot bury me in any legal fees because your accounts were just frozen. Jason stared at his smartphone. His thumb swiped frantically across the glass. His breathing turned ragged. The arrogant smirk that plastered his face all morning completely dissolved. The banking application displayed a red banner, account frozen. He tapped another. Frozen, offshore portfolio. Frozen. Judge Mitchell slammed his gavel. Enough of this circus, he bellowed. I am not listening to another word in open court. We are taking a recess. I am ordering the parties into mediation room B right now. Sit down with a court mediator. Figure out a temporary arrangement. If you cannot reach an agreement, I will make a ruling none of you will like. Bailiff, escort them out. The doors of mediation room B slammed shut. The room was no bigger than a walk-in closet. A single fluorescent bulb hummed overhead. A battered table took up most of the space. The court mediator took one look at the hatred between us and stepped into the hallway. That left me alone with Jason and Madison. Jason slumped into a plastic chair, staring blankly. He was completely catatonic. Financial ruin had short-circuited his brain. Madison, however, was not ready to surrender. She paced the cramped room like a caged cat before glaring at me. You think you are so smart, Madison sneered. You think freezing accounts means anything to Jason. You are nothing, Clara. Look at you. You walked into court wearing a cheap polyester suit. You look like a homeless person begging for change. You look pathetic. I sat down. I placed my red folder on the table. I let her dig the hole deeper. Jason is a visionary, Madison hissed. He is building an empire and took me along. Do you have any idea what my life is like? Jason just bought me a 10,000 square foot mansion in the Palisades. It has a heated infinity pool and a wine cellar. It is in my name. I own it. You are fighting for scraps while I am living in a palace. You will never win. I looked at her perfectly contoured face. Then I opened my red folder. It is a beautiful property, I said. 5 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms. It must be wonderful. Madison lifted her chin. It is. You will never step foot inside it. I pulled a stack of stapled papers from the folder and tossed them onto the table. They landed with a heavy slap. I suggest you read the deed, Madison, because your name is not on it. Madison froze. Her eyes darted from my face to the papers. What are you talking about? Jason bought that house through a shell company, I explained. He did that to hide the asset during our divorce. But he made a very critical error. He used the $80,000 he stole from my military medical payout to secure the initial financing. That makes the property subject to federal asset recovery. And worse than that, Madison, he never paid off the house. The entire property is heavily mortgaged. He took out 3 separate loans against that mansion. Madison's face lost its color. She looked down at the top page of the stack. It was a formal bank notice. It had bold black letters stamped across the top. Since all of Jason's accounts were frozen by federal investigators this morning, the automatic mortgage payments failed to clear, I stated. The shell company is officially in default. The bank issued a notice of foreclosure 2 hours ago. You do not own a mansion, Madison. You own a massive debt. You are living in a house that the bank is going to repossess before the end of the month. You have absolutely nothing. Madison's hands began to shake. She picked up the document. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon. She saw the foreclosure stamp. She saw the shell company name. She saw the staggering amount of debt attached to her so-called palace. She dropped the paper. She turned her head to look at Jason. Jason was still staring at the wall. You lied to me, Madison whispered, her voice trembling with rising panic. You told me the house was paid off. You told me it was secure. You told me I was protected. Jason did not answer her. He slowly turned his head away from the wall. He did not look at Madison. He looked directly at me. His eyes were bloodshot. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping under his skin. The panic had vanished. It was replaced by a dark, venomous rage. He realized his money was gone. He realized his house was gone. He realized his mistress was turning on him. But he still had one card left. You think you can destroy my life and walk away? Jason hissed, leaning across the narrow table. You think freezing my money makes you safe? You are an idiot, Clara. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone. He slammed it onto the table between us. I still have my investors. Jason snarled, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. I have men backing my tech company who sit on the boards of the biggest financial institutions. Men who can end careers with a single phone call. I know exactly how much your sister Rachel loves her little design business. I know she just took out a massive commercial loan to expand her showroom. If you do not walk out of this room and drop every single charge right now, I will make one phone call. I will tell my investors to pull their backing from the bank holding her loan. I will have Rachel's business crushed before dinner. I will ruin your sister's life, and I will make sure she knows exactly whose fault it is. Jason leaned closer. His face was inches from mine. Now pick up that phone, Clara, and call off the dogs. Or watch your entire family burn to the ground. Jason lunged across the narrow table. His hands were curled into tight fists. He leaned forward until his face was inches from mine. His breath smelled of stale coffee and panic. You pick up your phone right now, Clara, Jason commanded. You call your lawyers. You drop this entire case. If you do not, I swear to you, I will destroy Rachel. I know exactly how much debt she is carrying. My investors own the bank that holds her commercial loan. One phone call and they will call the loan due immediately. She will be bankrupt by tomorrow morning. I will make sure she loses everything. I looked at him. I did not reach for my phone. I simply smiled. The door to the mediation room swung open. My sister Rachel walked in. She was wearing a sharp, tailored suit. She looked perfectly calm. She pulled out a chair and sat down right next to me. You are going to destroy my business. Jason, Rachel asked, her voice dripping with amusement. That is a very interesting threat. I would love to see you try. Jason glared at her. Do not test me, Rachel. You know exactly who I am connected to. You know exactly what kind of power my investors have in this city. You are a small-time interior designer swimming with sharks. I will have your showroom boarded up and your assets seized before you can even hire a lawyer to fight it. You took out a $2 million expansion loan last month. I know the terms, I know the clauses, I will ruin you. Rachel leaned back in her chair. She crossed her legs. She looked at Jason like he was a toddler throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. You are incredibly out of touch, Jason, Rachel said, shaking her head. You have been so busy hiding your own assets and planning this ridiculous custody ambush that you completely stopped paying attention to what the rest of us were doing. What are you talking about? Jason snapped, his voice rising. I did not take out a commercial loan, Rachel explained. I finalized the sale of my entire design firm. I sold the business 3 weeks ago. I sold it to an international conglomerate for $12 million in cash. Jason froze. Madison let out a small gasp. You sold it? Jason muttered. Yes, Rachel smiled brightly. I sold everything. The brand, the showroom, the client list, all of it. I do not owe a single dime to any bank. Your powerful investors cannot call in a loan that does not exist. You have absolutely zero leverage over me. Jason's chest heaved. He was visibly struggling to process the information. His ultimate threat had just evaporated into thin air. $12 million, he whispered. Rachel nodded. $12 million. And before you start planning ways to try and sue me or attach those funds to this custody battle, you should know exactly where that money is. I did not keep it in my personal accounts. I did not invest it in the stock market. I transferred every single cent of that $12 million into an irrevocable trust. Jason's eyes widened. A trust? Yes, Rachel continued, her voice turning cold and hard. An irrevocable trust. The primary beneficiary of that trust is my nephew Mason. Clara is the sole trustee. The money is completely locked down. It is legally untouchable. You cannot sue for it. You cannot freeze it. You cannot claim it as a marital asset. You cannot touch a single penny of that money, Jason. I made sure of it. Jason stared at her. His face was completely blank. His entire world was collapsing around him in real time. His bank accounts were frozen. His mansion was in default. His massive government contract was useless because he could not access the capital to fulfill it. And now his ex-wife, whom he had tried to paint as a destitute, unstable burden, was sitting across from him with $12 million of untouchable cash backing her up. You planned this? Jason whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and absolute rage. You planned this the whole time. I did not plan anything, Jason, I said, leaning forward to meet his eyes. I simply protected my son from a monster. You came into this courtroom trying to ruin me. You tried to use my injuries against me. You forged documents. You lied to a judge. You tried to take the only thing that matters to me. You thought I was weak because I walk with a limp. You thought I was broken because I have scars. You were wrong, Jason snapped. The last shred of his corporate composure vanished. He was no longer the arrogant CEO. He was a desperate, cornered animal. He roared in frustration. He lunged across the table. His arm shot out, aiming directly for Rachel's throat. He wanted to hurt her. He wanted to punish her for outsmarting him. He wanted to inflict physical pain because he had lost every other battle. He never even made it across the table. The door to the mediation room was still open. Jamal had been standing right outside. He moved with a speed that was terrifying. He stepped into the room and caught Jason's wrist mid-air. Jamal's grip was like a steel vise. He did not just stop Jason's arm, he twisted it. He twisted it backward and down, forcing Jason's chest flat against the table. Jason let out a sharp cry of pain. His face slammed into the cheap laminate wood. Jamal leaned over him. He kept the pressure steady on Jason's twisted arm. I am a pediatric surgeon, Jamal whispered. His deep baritone voice was perfectly calm, perfectly controlled, perfectly terrifying. I know the human anatomy better than you know your own bank accounts. I know exactly how much pressure it takes to dislocate a joint. I know exactly which tendons will snap first. Right now, I am applying 4 pounds of pressure to your radial nerve joint. If I apply 6 pounds, your wrist will separate. If I apply 8 pounds, your elbow will dislocate. If you twitch, if you breathe too heavily, if you even think about moving toward my wife or my sister-in-law again, I will apply 10 pounds of pressure, and you will spend the next 6 months learning how to feed yourself with your left hand. Jason gasped. He tried to pull away, but Jamal tightened his grip just a fraction of an inch. Jason let out a high-pitched whine. "Do you understand me?" Jamal asked. "Yes." Jason choked out, his face pressed hard against the table. "Yes." Jamal held him there for 5 more seconds. He let the reality of the situation sink into Jason's mind. Then Jamal released his grip. He stepped back, smoothing his tie. Jason scrambled backward. He clutched his wrist against his chest. He was breathing heavily. His eyes darted from Jamal to Rachel to me. He looked like a terrified child. Madison was backed into the corner of the room. She was clutching her designer purse to her chest. She looked completely horrified. The door to the mediation room swung wide open. A court bailiff stepped inside. "Judge Mitchell is back on the bench," the bailiff announced. "He is ready for you." Jamal slowly released his iron grip on Jason. He stepped back. Jason stumbled backward, rubbing his wrist, his face a twisted mask of humiliation. Before anyone could step toward the hallway, a shrill voice pierced the room like a jagged knife. "I am calling the police right now!" Susan screamed, shoving past the bewildered bailiff. Her face was flushed purple, and her hands shook violently as she dug a smartphone out of her handbag. "I saw what you just did, you thug. You assaulted my son. I am calling 911 and having you arrested. You are going straight to federal jail." Susan jammed her thumb against the screen. She was foaming at the mouth with absolute rage. She wanted to regain control. She thought she could weaponize the police to save Jason. I moved faster than she could dial. I stepped into her personal space and snatched the smartphone out of her hands. "Give that back!" Susan shrieked, lunging forward to claw at my face. "You are a thief!" "You really do not want the police in this room, Susan," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You do not want federal investigators digging into the finances of Jason Company right now. If they start looking, they will find out exactly where all the missing funds went." Susan froze. Her hand hovered in the air. The color rapidly drained from her face, leaving her looking chalky and old. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "What are you talking about?" Jason snapped, rubbing his bruised wrist. "What missing funds?" I turned to my ex-husband. "Jason, you have been so obsessed with ruining my life and hiding your assets from the divorce courts that you completely ignored your own accounting department. You simply left the keys to the kingdom sitting on the kitchen counter. Did you ever wonder why your mother was so desperate to secure full custody of Mason for you? Did you ever wonder why she was willing to forge pediatric nutritional reports and commit perjury in front of a federal judge? She loves her grandson," Jason barked, but his voice lacked conviction. He saw the panic spreading across her face. "She loves your bank accounts," I corrected him. I opened my red folder. I pulled out a thick stack of glossy paper. I threw it onto the table right over the foreclosure notices I had shown Madison earlier. "These are not pediatric reports, Susan. These are casino receipts. These are wire transfer logs. These are withdrawal statements from the Bellagio, the Venetian, and other offshore gambling sites." Susan let out a strangled gasp. She clutched her chest. She started taking short, frantic breaths. I laid the documents out one by one. "Look at the exact numbers, Jason. Look at the dates. Over the last 18 months, your mother has funneled almost $400,000 out of your corporate operating account. She used your fake shell companies to pay off her massive gambling debts. She lost your money at the blackjack tables. She used your defense contract seed money to keep her bookies from breaking her legs. She knew that if you lost custody of Mason, I would demand a full forensic audit of your finances for child support. An audit would expose her theft. An audit would send her to federal prison. She is not trying to save her grandson. She is trying to save herself." The silence in the room was suffocating. Madison stood in the corner staring at Susan with wide, horrified eyes. Jason walked slowly toward the table. He reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the top receipt. He stared at the bold red numbers. He flipped to the next page. He looked at the wire transfer logs. He saw his mother's signature authorizing the withdrawal of corporate funds. He saw the name of his tech company plastered next to the name of a Las Vegas casino. His breathing became heavy and ragged. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had been betrayed by the one person he thought was entirely on his side. Susan began to hyperventilate. Her chest heaved up and down. She reached out toward Jason with shaking hands. "Jason, please," she begged, her voice cracking into a pathetic whine. "You have to understand. It was an accident. I got in too deep. The house always wins. I was going to pay it back. I swear I was going to pay it back once your company went public. You have to protect me. You are my son. You cannot let them do this to me." Jason stared at her. His eyes were completely dead. The corporate golden boy had finally hit rock bottom. His company was frozen. His mansion was in foreclosure. His ex-wife had $12 million in a trust fund, and his very own mother had embezzled his startup capital. He raised his hand. He slapped the stack of casino receipts off the table. The papers fluttered through the air and scattered across the cheap carpet. "You are on your own," Jason hissed, his voice dripping with absolute venom. "Do you hear me? You stole from my company. You jeopardized my defense contract. You just ruined everything. I am not protecting you. I am not paying for your lawyers. I am just throwing you to the wolves." Susan let out a piercing scream. The betrayal shattered her entirely. She pushed herself off the wall. She pointed a trembling finger right at Jason's face. "You ungrateful little bastard!" Susan yelled, her voice echoing into the hallway. "I lied for you. I forged those documents for you. I will not go down for this alone. If you abandon me right now, I will march straight back into that courtroom, and I will testify against you. I will tell the judge exactly how you manipulated the medical release forms. I will tell the judge absolutely everything you ever did wrong." The bailiff stood in the doorway looking from Jason to the scattered casino receipts on the floor. "Judge Mitchell is waiting." The bailiff repeated, his voice firm. "I suggest you wrap this up and get back into the courtroom right now." Jason slowly pushed himself off the table where Jamal had pinned him. He rubbed his wrist and adjusted his tailored jacket. "Give us exactly 2 minutes," Jason told the bailiff. "We are on the verge of a temporary settlement. We just need 2 minutes to finalize the paperwork." The bailiff frowned but nodded and stepped back into the hallway, pulling the heavy wooden door almost shut. The moment the latch clicked, Jason's demeanor shifted. The terrified man who had just been pinned to the table vanished. The corporate shark was gone too. What replaced them was a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose. He was completely out of options. His offshore accounts were frozen. His shell company was in default. His mistress was looking at him with absolute disgust, and his own mother was sitting in the corner weeping and promising to testify against him in federal court. The mediation had failed entirely. He was not walking out of this courthouse with a victory. He was walking out of this courthouse into a federal investigation. Jason turned his back on Susan, ignoring her pathetic sobbing. He ignored Madison, who was quietly sliding toward the exit, trying to distance herself from the wreckage of his life. He walked slowly back to the battered mediation table and planted his hands on the scratched surface. He stared at me with eyes so hollow they looked like cracked glass. "You think you won?" "Clara," Jason whispered. His voice was completely devoid of emotion. It was a terrifying flat tone. "You think you stripped me of everything. You took my company. You took my money. You took my house. You outplayed me in front of the judge. You brought your sister and her new trust fund in here to make me look like a fool. You exposed my mother and ruined my marriage to Madison. You think you are walking out of here today with primary custody of my son. You think you get to start a new life with Mason and never look back." I did not break eye contact. "I am walking out of here with my son Jason. The judge has seen the medical records. He has seen the financial fraud. He has seen exactly what kind of environment you provide. This is over. Accept it." Jason let out a dark, breathless chuckle. It is never over, Clara. Not for me. He reached his uninjured hand inside the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He bypassed his phone. He bypassed his gold pen. He pulled out a folded piece of thick cardstock paper. He smoothed it out against the table. He slid it across the surface until it stopped right next to my red folder. I looked down. It was a printed flight itinerary. It was a private aviation charter document. The passenger list had two names, Jason and Mason. The destination was a small airport in a country with absolutely no extradition treaty with the United States. My flight leaves tonight at 9 o'clock, Jason stated. His voice was a venomous hiss. My private jet is sitting on the tarmac at the regional airfield right now. It is fully fueled. The flight plan is logged. The clearance is approved. I have a vehicle waiting outside the courthouse. If I walk back into that courtroom and lose custody, I am not going back to my hotel. I am going straight to Mason's school. I am pulling him out of his classroom. We are getting in that car and we are driving straight to the airstrip. We will be in the air before you even finish filling out your temporary custody paperwork. We will be over the ocean before you realize he is gone. You will never see him again, Clara. You will spend the rest of your pathetic life wondering what he looks like. I will raise him in a country where your federal agents and your asset freezes mean absolutely nothing. I will teach him to hate your name. Jason slammed his hand flat against the itinerary. Drop the custody defense, Jason commanded. You walk back into that courtroom right now and you tell Judge Mitchell you are withdrawing your petition. You tell him you agree to joint custody with me having primary physical control. You drop the financial allegations. You drop the medical fraud allegations. You give me everything I want, or I am taking my son and disappearing forever. That is my final offer. Make your choice, Clara. The silence in the small room was deafening. Susan had stopped crying. Madison was staring at Jason in absolute shock. Jamal shifted his weight, ready to intervene. Rachel placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. Everyone waited for me to break. They expected me to scream. They expected me to panic. They expected a mother facing the absolute worst nightmare imaginable to fall apart completely. I did not panic. I did not blink. I did not show an ounce of fear. I slowly lifted my left wrist. I looked at the face of my silver watch. I watched the second hand tick forward. I looked back up at Jason. I smiled. It was a cold, calculated smile that made the color drain from Jason's face. Your jet is not going anywhere, Jason, I said softly. I suggest you check your messages. Your pilot, Captain Reynolds, just lost his aviation license exactly 10 minutes ago. Federal agents boarded your aircraft while we were sitting in this room. They found the illicit cash you loaded into the cargo hold last night. The plane has been completely impounded by the authorities. You have absolutely no escape route left. Your entire grand escape plan is now just another piece of criminal evidence. We stepped out of the claustrophobic mediation room and back into the sprawling marble hallway of the courthouse. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind us, sealing away the absolute disaster of the last 20 minutes. Jason stumbled out first, looking completely disoriented. His expensive tailored suit now looked slightly rumpled. He rubbed his wrist where Jamal had applied that terrifying surgical pressure. For the first time in his entire life, Jason realized he was not the smartest person in the room. He realized I was not the broken, helpless veteran he thought he could easily crush. His money was frozen. His real estate was in foreclosure. His escape route was currently swarming with federal agents. He walked a few paces away from us and stopped near a large marble pillar. He was breathing heavily. His eyes darted around the hallway. He needed a new weapon. He had to regain control of the narrative before the judge made a final ruling. He leaned against the cold stone and pulled his smartphone from his pocket. His hands were shaking, but his jaw set into a hard, rigid line. He knew legal threats would no longer work. He knew financial intimidation was completely off the table because his bank accounts were entirely locked down. He had to pivot to the only arena where he still held massive influence: public perception. He dialed a number and pressed the device hard against his ear. He turned his back to us, shielding his mouth with his hand, but his voice echoed sharply down the empty corridor. He called Marcus, his lead public relations director. Marcus was a high-priced corporate fixer who specialized in burying scandals and destroying reputations for wealthy executives. Jason did not bother with pleasantries. He launched straight into his demands. "I need a story planted right now," Jason ordered, his voice vibrating with desperate fury. "I need a massive smear campaign launched across every major digital platform before Judge Mitchell returns to the bench." Jason paced back and forth behind the marble pillar. "I need you to completely dismantle Clara," he instructed Marcus. "I want her painted as an unstable and dangerous individual. Dig into her military records immediately. I do not care what the actual official files say. Leak a fabricated story to your highest contacts at the major tabloid networks. Tell them she was dishonorably discharged from the armed forces. Tell them she was brought up on severe charges of insubordination and violent conduct toward her commanding officers. Make it sound like she is a psychological ticking time bomb who cannot be trusted around her own son. Pay whatever exorbitant fees you need to pay to get it on the front pages immediately. I want push notifications going to every smartphone in this city within the next 10 minutes. Jason paused, listening to his fixer on the other end of the line. "Do not argue with me about libel laws," Jason hissed loudly enough for the sound to carry down the hall. "I will deal with the defamation lawsuits later. Right now, I just need the judge to see that specific headline." Judges absolutely hate public relations nightmares. If the media paints her as a violent, disgraced soldier, the judge will never grant her primary custody. He will view her as a massive liability. "Do it, Marcus. Put the story out everywhere. Burn her military record to the ground and make sure everyone thinks she is completely insane." Jason ended the call and shoved the phone back into his pocket. He took a deep breath and smoothed the lapels of his jacket. He rolled his shoulders back, trying to recapture his usual arrogant posture. He walked slowly back toward our group. He did not say a single word to his mother, who was still sniffling quietly on a wooden bench nearby. He completely ignored Madison, who was glaring at him with pure hatred over her impending real estate disaster. He stopped a few feet away from my sister Rachel and me. A sickeningly confident smirk crept back onto his face. He looked like a man who had just played his ultimate trump card. He was absolutely certain that this ruthless final strategy would guarantee his victory and secure his absolute control over Mason, regardless of the very real damage it caused me. He crossed his arms over his chest and leaned against the wall, waiting for the digital poison to spread. Jamal stood close to me, his presence a silent warning to Jason to keep his physical distance. Rachel squeezed my arm gently, offering her silent, steadfast support. We simply stood in the hallway, waiting for the bailiff to call us back inside the courtroom. The tension in the air was so thick it felt hard to breathe. The absolute silence in the hallway was suddenly broken by a sharp, synchronized buzzing sound. My phone vibrated intensely inside my pocket. A second later, Rachel's phone chimed loud and clear. Then Jamal's phone went off. Down the hall, a lawyer passing by pulled out his device and stopped dead in his tracks. The push notifications were hitting every device simultaneously. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. The screen illuminated with a breaking news alert from one of the largest digital tabloid networks in the entire country. My face was plastered across the front page. It was a photograph taken of me in my military uniform years ago. The bold red headline screamed across the top of the glowing screen. "Disgraced veteran fights for custody, following violent insubordination and dishonorable discharge." I stared at the blatant lie completely manufactured to destroy my credibility in front of the judge. Madison pulled her phone from her designer handbag and read the exact same alert. She looked up from her screen and stared directly at me. A slow, cruel smile stretched across her perfectly painted lips. Madison threw her head back and laughed maliciously, her voice echoing off the walls. Madison tilted her head back and let out a sharp cackle. She pointed her finger at my phone screen. "Look at you," Clara Madison sneered. "You look psychotic in that uniform. No wonder they kicked you out. Judge Mitchell will grant Jason full custody." Jason pushed himself off the wall. He walked toward me. His confidence had fully returned. He believed he had delivered the kill shot. He looked down at me with absolute contempt. I warned you, Clara, Jason said. I told you I would destroy you. You wanted to play hardball. Now the entire world knows exactly what you are. A disgraced, violent reject who could not follow basic military orders. How does family court view a dishonorably discharged veteran? He stepped closer, invading my space. Sign the custody papers right now, Clara, Jason demanded. Give me primary physical custody of Mason. Walk away from the pending financial audit. Do what I say, and Marcus will issue a retraction tomorrow. I will claim it was a misunderstanding. If you refuse, this story runs on every network by 5. Your reputation will be shattered. You will never find employment again. You will be a complete outcast. I stared at the glowing screen of my smartphone. The article was spreading like wildfire. My phone buzzed with 3 more notifications picking up the drop. Marcus was earning his exorbitant fee. He blasted the fake story to every media syndicate. People stopped and stared at their phones. A few glanced up, recognizing my face from the alerts. Rachel stepped forward, her fists clenched at her sides. "You are a monster, Jason," Rachel hissed. "You are destroying the mother of your child with fabricated lies." Jason did not even look at her. "It is not a lie if the public believes it," Jason replied. "Perception is the only reality. Right now, the reality is Clara is a danger. The judge will have no choice but to protect my son." Jamal shifted his weight. "Give me the word, Clara," Jamal murmured. "I will throw him through that window." I raised my hand. I looked Jason dead in the eyes. I did not show anger. I did not show fear. I showed nothing but calm. "You really stepped in it, Jason," I said softly. "You have no idea what you just unleashed." The brass doors at the hallway end swung open. Everyone turned. 3 men marched in. They moved with absolute precision. They wore dark suits. Their posture was rigid. Small earpieces rested behind their right ears. Subtle silver lapel pins caught the fluorescent light. They were federal agents carrying authority. The hallway instantly quieted. Bystanders stepped back to clear a path. Jason straightened his posture. He masked a flash of panic with his arrogant persona. He assumed they were agents investigating his frozen assets and his mother embezzlement. He assumed his 2 minutes were up. But then his inflated ego took over. He checked his phone and jumped to a different conclusion. "They are here for you, Clara," Jason sneered. He actually laughed. "They must have seen the alert. They are probably here to detain a disgraced veteran. You are going away in handcuffs." Jason stepped forward to intercept the agents. "Gentlemen," Jason announced, "I am Jason Caldwell. I am the father involved in this custody dispute. I assume you are here regarding her. As you can see from the news, she is highly unstable. I cooperate with federal authorities." The 3 men did not slow down. They did not acknowledge Jason, introduction. They did not even break their stride. The lead agent walked right past Jason. The other 2 agents ignored him. Jason spun around in utter bewilderment. He watched the agents march directly toward me. Jamal took a step back, recognizing their demeanor. Rachel held her breath. Madison lowered her phone, her malicious smile vanishing. The 3 men stopped 3 feet in front of me. They snapped their heels together. In unison, they raised their hands and delivered a crisp salute. Major, the lead agent barked, "It is an honor to see you, Ma'am." I returned the salute with sharp precision. "At ease, gentlemen," I replied. The agents dropped their hands, assuming a parade rest. The hallway was paralyzed. Jason's jaw dropped. His eyes darted from the agents to me. His brain could not compute what he was witnessing. He had paid thousands to brand me a reject. Yet 3 agents had just marched in and saluted me. Major Madison squeaked, "What are you talking about? She is a low-level nobody. She got kicked out." The lead agent glared at Madison with disdain. "You are speaking to an intelligence officer," he stated. "I strongly suggest you remain silent." Jason's face turned a sickly shade of gray. He stumbled backward. "Clara," Jason stammered. "What is this? What is going on? Who are these men?" I ignored his pathetic stammering. The lead agent reached inside his jacket and produced a military secure tablet. It was encased in rubber and biometric scanners. He tapped a sequence and handed the device to me. "Major," the lead agent said loudly, Command Center flagged the digital anomaly 4 minutes ago. The hostile narrative deployment was successfully traced and intercepted. I took the heavy tablet. The screen displayed a highly classified tracking matrix. It showed a web connecting Jason public relations firm directly to the tabloid publishers. It traced the financial wire transfers. It captured the IP addresses used to launch the fake story. Cyber Command had dismantled Jason's smear campaign. I looked up from the glowing screen. I locked eyes with Jason. His chest was heaving. He looked like a man on the trapdoor of a gallows. "You made a fatal miscalculation, Jason," I announced. "You thought you were attacking a helpless civilian. You thought you could manipulate the press. But you did not just spread a rumor. You attacked an active deep-cover operative. Your little smear campaign just triggered a federal defamation mandate." Jason stood paralyzed, the color completely drained from his face. He stared at the glowing screen of the federal tablet in my hands, then looked at the 3 imposing agents flanking me. His mouth opened, but he refused to produce a sound. The reality of his situation was penetrating his thick skull. He had stepped into a federal trap of his own making. The lead agent stepped forward, locking eyes on Jason. "You are officially under investigation for cyber espionage, wire fraud, and federal defamation," the agent stated. "Do not attempt to leave the building or access digital devices." Madison saw the invisible walls closing in around her. Her malicious laughter died the absolute second the agent saluted me. She looked at Jason and saw a rapidly sinking ship. Madison took a step backward, grabbing the handle of her designer handbag. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, edging toward the courthouse corridor. "I have nothing to do with any of this," Madison announced. Her voice trembled, but she tried to inject her tone. "I am calling off the engagement right now, Jason. You are a lunatic. I come from a respectable family. My father is an investor, and I refuse to have my reputation dragged through mud because you fight the federal government. I am leaving." She took another step toward the exit door. The 2 federal agents shifted their weight and completely blocked her path. They crossed their arms and stared her down. "You are not going anywhere, Madison," I said. I tapped the screen of the tablet. I swiped past Jason and opened an encrypted file. The intelligence matrix did not flag Jason today. When you target a deep-cover operative, the agency runs a full background diagnostic on every person in the network. That includes you. Madison froze. Her manicured fingers dug into the soft leather of her purse. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "You have no right to look into my background. I am a private citizen. I have my own trust fund. I am independent from Jason financial disasters." I looked at the text on the tablet and let out a laugh. "You do not have a trust fund, Madison. In fact, your real name is not Madison. It is Margaret. You changed it 4 years ago after filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in Nevada. Your father is not an investor. He is a retired mechanic living in a trailer park outside of Reno. You completely fabricated your persona to infiltrate social circles." Jason whipped his head around and stared at her. "What is she talking about?" Jason demanded. Madison swallowed hard. Her beautiful face was profusely sweating. "She is lying, Jason," Madison stammered. "She is trying to tear us apart. She is an insane military reject making things up to save her custody case." I scrolled down on the tablet. "I am looking at your current financial portfolio, Margaret. It is a disaster. You owe over $300,000 to 2 creditors in Las Vegas. You have been dodging their collection calls for 8 months. You moved to this city to find a wealthy Mark to pay off your debts before those creditors broke your legs. You found Jason. You thought you hit the jackpot." Jason took a step toward her, his hands balled into tight fists. "Tell me this is a total lie," Jason growled. I did not give her a chance to answer. "But then Jason Company hit a rough patch," I continued. "His mother Susan embezzled the seed money. The offshore accounts were drying up. You panicked, Madison. You realized your golden goose was drowning in debt. You decided to carve out your own piece of the pie before the company collapsed. Over the last 4 months, you have been logging into Jason accounts. You used his private passwords while he was sleeping. You created dummy vendor invoices and siphoned $85,000 directly into a shell account in the Cayman Islands to pay your Vegas creditors. The silence in the hallway was deafening. Susan gasped from her wooden bench. Jamal crossed his arms, looking at Madison with absolute disgust. Rachel shook her head in disbelief. Jason lost his mind. The betrayal fractured his sanity. His own mother had robbed him. Now his fiancée was stealing the scraps. He lunged forward. He grabbed Madison by the shoulders of her blouse and slammed her hard against the wall. "You stole from me!" Jason screamed. His face was twisted into a mask of rage. "You hacked into my company accounts. I gave you everything. I bought you that ring. I promised you a mansion. You parasitic liar. I will ruin you. I will have you thrown in a penitentiary for wire fraud. I will destroy your life." The lead federal agent stepped forward and ripped Jason away from her. He shoved Jason back, keeping a grip on his lapels. "Stand down right now," the agent commanded. Madison pushed herself off the wall. Her hair was disheveled. Her blouse was torn at the collar. She was breathing heavily, but the fear in her eyes was suddenly replaced by a desperation. She pointed a finger at Jason. "You cannot ruin me!" Jason, Madison shrieked. "You are broke. There is nothing left to steal. You think you are some genius, but you are a fraud. Go ahead and call the police. Let them audit your company. Tell them about your $20 million government contract. Tell them how you secured it." Jason froze his eyes, widening in panic. "Shut your mouth, Madison!" he hissed desperately. "I will not shut up!" Madison screamed, her voice echoing down the corridor. She turned to the federal agents and pointed at Jason. "He does not have any proprietary technology. His $20 million defense contract is fraudulent. He bribed a foreign contractor and built his system on stolen encrypted data." Jason lunged, his face contorted. He reached for Madison's throat. He needed to silence her. The fraudulent $20 million defense contract was the only thing keeping him out of a federal penitentiary. Now his fiancée was burning it to ashes in front of active federal agents. "Shut your mouth!" Jason screamed. "You do not know what you are saying." He never reached her. Jamal moved with blinding speed. He stepped between them. He drove his forearms straight into Jason's chest. The impact lifted Jason. He crashed hard against the marble wall. Jason slid down, gasping for air. Jamal stood over him. "You lay one finger on her and I will break both of your arms," Jamal stated calmly. "Stay on the ground, Jason." Madison scrambled backward against the wall. The dam had completely broken. She realized that dragging Jason down was her only leverage. If she exposed his massive federal crimes, she might secure a plea deal for her own embezzlement. She looked directly at me. "I have the proof," Madison yelled. "I have all the decrypted files." Jason did not develop that targeting software. He stole the core algorithm from a defense contractor in Munich. He bribed the procurement officer to secure the beta testing phase. The entire $20 million contract is a complete sham. The software has a massive backdoor flaw that he covered up during the final presentation. I have the emails. I have the bank transfer receipts. I saved everything on a secure cloud drive. I did not interrupt her. I simply raised the secure federal tablet the lead agent had handed me. The screen was glowing with a bright red recording symbol. The biometric sensors were actively logging the audio. Every word Madison just confessed was being uploaded directly in real time to Cyber Command's secure servers. It was instantly classified as federal evidence. "You just gave a full verbal confession to wire fraud, conspiracy to commit treason, and federal bribery," I said. My voice was steady and completely devoid of sympathy. "And you did it on a secure federal recording device while standing 3 feet away from active intelligence operatives." Jason stared at the glowing red symbol on the tablet. His eyes dilated in absolute horror. He looked at the 3 federal agents. They were no longer standing at a relaxed parade rest. Their hands were subtly positioned near their waistbands. Their eyes were locked on him, tracking his every micro-movement. They were actively containing a hostile federal suspect. Jason's mind desperately tried to calculate a way out. He looked at his mother Susan, who was sobbing uncontrollably on the wooden bench. He looked at Madison, who was actively negotiating her own immunity by selling him to the government. He looked at my sister Rachel, who was staring at him with pure vindicated disgust. He looked at me. He saw the cold, unwavering discipline of a military officer who had systematically dismantled his entire life without breaking a single drop of sweat. He had no leverage, he had no money, he had no allies. He had just been implicated in a massive federal crime inside a public courthouse. The walls were literally closing in on him. Jason scrambled to his feet. He ignored the burning pain in his chest. He looked down the long corridor toward the main public exit. He saw the glass doors leading out to the street. He saw freedom. It was a completely irrational thought born out of sheer panic, but his survival instincts hijacked his logic. He spun around and bolted. He sprinted down the marble hallway, his expensive shoes slipping slightly on the polished stone. He shoved past a bewildered attorney and knocked over a small trash receptacle. He was running for his life. He did not make it 10 feet. The two flanking federal agents moved simultaneously. They did not shout a warning. They simply executed a flawless tactical takedown. The agent on the left swept Jason's legs out from under him. The agent on the right grabbed his shoulder and drove him straight into the floor. Jason hit the marble with a sickening crunch, his face smashed against the stone. Before he could even cry out, the agents had his arms pinned behind his back. The sharp metallic click of steel handcuffs echoed through the hallway. "You are detained pending a full federal inquiry," the lead agent stated, walking slowly over to where Jason lay pinned on the ground. "You are a flight risk and a threat to national security." Jason writhed on the floor. His perfect suit was torn. His nose was bleeding. He looked pathetic. He looked up at me from the ground, his eyes filled with a terrifying mixture of defeat and absolute hatred. "Clara," he gasped, spitting blood onto the pristine floor. "You planned this. You planned all of it." I walked over and stood above him. "I did not plan your greed, Jason," I said quietly. "I did not plan your fraud. I just let you build your own trap. I simply waited for you to step inside and close the door." The sudden heavy groan of thick wood interrupted the chaotic scene. Everyone immediately turned their heads. The massive double doors to the courtroom slowly swung open. The bailiff stepped out into the hallway holding a thick stack of manila folders. He took one long look at Jason bleeding and handcuffed on the floor, surrounded by federal agents. The hardened bailiff did not even blink. He had already seen absolutely everything in family court. The bailiff cleared his throat loudly and adjusted his uniform. "The 15-minute recess is absolutely over," the bailiff announced, his loud, booming voice cutting right through the heavy tension. "Judge Thompson is back on the bench. He is ready to issue the final ruling on the custody arrangement and the asset division. Everyone involved in the Caldwell versus Caldwell case needs to step back inside the courtroom immediately to hear the verdict." We filed back into the courtroom in complete silence. The heavy oak doors shut behind us, sealing off the chaotic hallway and trapping us in a suffocating atmosphere. The air inside the room was incredibly dense. It felt as though all the oxygen had been completely sucked out of the space, leaving only a thick, heavy dread. I walked to my table with my posture perfectly straight. Rachel took her seat in the gallery right behind me. Jamal stood like a silent sentinel near the back wall, keeping a watchful eye on every single movement in the room. The federal agents hauled Jason up from the marble floor. They dragged him through the courtroom doors. His expensive tailored suit was completely ruined. One of his lapels was ripped, and a dark crimson stain spread across his crisp white collar from his bleeding nose. His hands remained tightly cuffed behind his back. The agents forced him into the chair next to his attorney. They stood directly behind him. Their presence was a massive, undeniable warning to everyone in the room. Susan hobbled in a few moments later, crying silently as she took a seat as far away from the agents as physically possible. Madison did not return. She had likely fled the building the absolute second the agents released her from the wall. Jason's high-priced attorney looked at his client in pure, unadulterated horror. He stared at the steel handcuffs cutting into Jason's wrists. He looked at the 3 federal agents standing at strict attention. The lawyer began to sweat profusely. He reached into his leather briefcase and started frantically shoving his perfectly organized legal briefs back inside. He wanted out. He knew exactly what a federal investigation meant. He was a family court attorney specializing in asset division and custody battles. He was not equipped to handle cyber espionage, wire fraud, or treason. He realized his client was radioactive. "Your Honor?" The attorney said, his voice shaking as he quickly stood up. He did not look at Jason. He looked directly at Judge Thompson, who had just taken his seat at the elevated bench. "I must formally request an immediate withdrawal as counsel of record for Mr. Caldwell. Due to unforeseen circumstances and a complete breakdown of the attorney-client relationship, I can no longer represent this man in any legal capacity." Jason twisted in his chair, his face contorted in absolute rage. He ignored the burning pain in his ribs and the blood dripping from his nose. He leaned toward his lawyer. "You are not going anywhere," Jason hissed venomously. His voice was low, but it carried across the silent courtroom. "I pay your exorbitant retainer. You work for me until I explicitly tell you otherwise. You are going to finish this hearing, and you are going to secure my absolute victory. Do not you dare abandon me right now." The lawyer swallowed hard, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. Jason glared at him with the desperation of a cornered animal. "If you walk out that door, I will sue you for legal malpractice and ruin your entire firm," Jason threatened. "Sit down and do exactly what I pay you to do." The attorney slowly sank back into his leather chair, looking thoroughly defeated. He refused to make eye contact with the judge. Judge Thompson peered over his reading glasses, taking in the bizarre scene. He looked at Jason, bleeding and handcuffed. He looked at the federal agents. Then he looked at me, sitting calmly with my hands folded on the table. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge began, his tone radiating stern authority, "would you care to explain why you are currently sitting in my courtroom wearing federal restraints?" Jason ignored the obvious reality of his situation. He was completely delusional, clinging to the last shred of his fabricated narrative. He believed he still held the winning hand. "Your Honor!" Jason shouted, his voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "The restraints are a massive misunderstanding, a temporary bureaucratic error that my legal team will resolve immediately. But none of that matters right now. What matters is the safety and well-being of my son Mason." Jason struggled to sit up straighter against the heavy steel cuffs. "You need to look at the news, Your Honor," Jason demanded desperately. "An hour ago, a major media syndicate published a comprehensive exposé on Clara. The entire world now knows the absolute truth about her past. She is a disgraced, violent veteran. She was dishonorably discharged from the military for insubordination and physically attacking her commanding officers. She is a massive liability. She is a psychological ticking time bomb who cannot be trusted to raise a child." The judge frowned deeply. He looked down at his monitor. I assume he was pulling up the news alerts that had flooded every device in the building. The courtroom remained deathly silent as the judge read the headline. "You must finalize the custody transfer right now," Jason begged, his voice cracking with desperate urgency. "You have the authority to grant me primary physical custody based on this new public evidence. You cannot leave my son in the care of an unstable, aggressive reject. The media is painting her as a monster because she is exactly that. Give me full custody of Mason and close this case today." Jason finished his frantic speech, breathing heavily. He stared at the judge, waiting for the gavel to strike in his favor. He honestly believed his purchased lies would outshine the federal agents standing right behind him. My lawyer, Mr. Sterling, sat perfectly still beside me. He let the words hang in the air for a long moment. Then Mr. Sterling slowly stood up. He smoothed his jacket and picked up a thick manila folder from our table. He walked confidently toward the center of the room. He formally submitted a classified document to the judge. He asked the judge to read the sealed military record aloud. The courtroom remained frozen in absolute silence. Mr. Sterling stood before the elevated bench, holding the thick manila envelope. The paper bore a red federal seal and black letters spelling "Top Secret." Judge Thompson leaned forward. He pushed his reading glasses up his nose. He had presided over family court for 22 years. He had seen messy divorces, brutal custody battles, and hidden assets. He had never seen a military dossier presented during a ruling. He extended his hand and took the envelope from my attorney. The paper crinkled loudly. He inspected the seal. He ran his thumb over the wax. He looked at the 3 federal agents standing directly behind Jason. Their presence validated the authenticity of the document. The judge reached for a silver letter opener resting on his desk. He slid the blade under the flap and sliced it open. The sharp, tearing sound echoed off the wood-paneled walls. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his wooden chair. The steel handcuffs clinked against the backrest. His nose was still bleeding slightly. He stared at the judge with a mix of arrogance and growing terror. Judge Thompson pulled watermarked papers from the envelope. He set them flat on his desk and began to read. The transformation in his demeanor was instantaneous and profound. When he had first entered the courtroom, he wore his usual expression of strict annoyance. He was a judge who possessed zero patience for dramatic outbursts or courtroom theatrics. He intended to scold everyone for the hallway commotion before issuing a standard custody ruling. But as his eyes scanned the first page, all of that strict annoyance completely evaporated. The color drained from his face. His jaw went slack. He quickly flipped to the second page. His eyes darted back and forth across the classified text. He was reading my actual military record. He was reading about the deep cover operations, the hostile extractions, and the classified intelligence missions. He was reading the unredacted truth about my service. He slowly looked up from the documents. He did not look at my lawyer. He looked directly at me. The harsh, judgmental glare he had given me during the previous hearings was entirely gone. It was replaced by a look of profound respect. He saw the woman who had sacrificed her identity for her country. He gave me a single subtle nod. It was an acknowledgement of my service. Then he slowly turned his head to look at Jason. The respect in the judge's eyes vanished instantly. As he stared down at Jason, his expression hardened into pure disgust. He looked at Jason as if he were a cockroach that had just crawled out of a sewer drain. He looked at the man who had spent the last 2 months calling me an unfit mother, an unstable reject, and a danger to my own son. Jason felt the crushing weight of that stare. He could not handle the silence. He could not handle the sudden shift in power. He needed to control the narrative. "Your Honor." Jason blurted out, his voice frantic and loud. "You cannot possibly believe whatever is printed on those pages. It is a complete fabrication. She is a fraud. My public relations team exposed her to the entire world. She was dishonorably discharged. She is a violent reject. That document is a desperate forgery designed to trick this court." My lawyer, Mr. Sterling, turned around and glared at Jason. The 3 federal agents standing behind Jason took a step forward. Their hands rested firmly on their holstered weapons. The lead agent pressed a finger to his earpiece, listening to an incoming transmission. Jason ignored the silent warning. He was completely unhinged. "Read it," Jason demanded, straining against his handcuffs. "Read it out loud to the court. I want everyone to hear the lies she is trying to pass off as federal evidence." Jason's face was red with exertion. He pulled against the steel cuffs, cutting into his wrists. "You are a family court judge," Jason yelled disrespectfully. "You do not have the clearance to accept fake spy documents. She is playing you for a fool. She is a broken, psychotic mess who cannot even hold down a normal civilian job. I am the only stable parent in this room. I have a $20 million government contract. I am a respected executive. She is nothing. Look at the news alerts on your phone. Look at what the media is saying about her right now. That is the real truth. She belongs in a psychiatric ward, not in my son's life. Throw that fake paper in the trash and grant me full physical custody immediately. You are wasting my time." The sheer audacity of Jason's demands hung heavily in the suffocating air. His high-priced attorney buried his face in his hands, wishing he could literally disappear into the floorboards. Susan sobbed louder from the gallery, realizing her son was actively destroying himself. Rachel sat perfectly still behind me, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Jamal watched Jason self-destruct with cold, calculating eyes. The federal agents remained perfectly rigid, ready to execute a physical takedown the second they received the order. Judge Thompson's face turned a deep shade of crimson. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the handle of his wooden gavel. He raised the heavy wooden mallet high into the air. He brought it down with earth-shattering force. The explosive crack echoed like a gunshot through the silent courtroom. It was so loud that Susan physically jumped in her seat. The judge pointed a shaking finger directly at Jason. He leaned over the elevated bench, his voice vibrating with absolute fury. "You will sit down and remain completely silent. Mr. Caldwell," Judge Thompson roared, "one more word out of your mouth and I will hold you in contempt. In fact, given the classified intelligence I am holding in my hands, your current behavior is bordering on federal treason." The echoing crack of the gavel paralyzed the courtroom. Judge Thompson glared down from the bench with absolute authority. His threat of federal treason hung in the heavy air. Jason shrank back into his wooden chair. The arrogant smirk completely vanished from his face. The reality of his situation finally crushed his inflated ego. He was not a brilliant tactician playing a clever legal game. He was a cornered criminal surrounded by federal agents. The two agents standing directly behind him did not move a single muscle. Their silent presence reinforced the absolute finality of the judge's warning. Jason's high-priced attorney stared at his legal pad. The lawyer refused to make eye contact with anyone. He knew the case was dead. He knew his client was going to a federal penitentiary. In the back row of the gallery, Susan sat frozen. She watched the devastating scene unfold with wide, terrified eyes. She saw the federal agents flanking her son. She looked at Madison, who had completely abandoned Jason in the hallway. Susan was a master manipulator. She had spent her entire life carefully arranging the chessboard to benefit herself. She had enabled Jason's worst behavior because it served her financial interests. But Susan possessed absolutely zero loyalty to a sinking ship. She realized instantly that Jason was completely doomed. The federal government was going to dismantle his entire life. They would trace every wire transfer. They would eventually find the massive sums of money she had embezzled from his accounts. Susan began to breathe heavily. Panic clawed at her chest. She needed a lifeline. She needed to distance herself from the radioactive disaster sitting at the defense table. She gripped the wooden pew in front of her and hauled herself to her feet. "Your Honor," Susan cried out. Her voice was shrill and desperate. It shattered the tense silence of the courtroom. Everyone turned to look at the back of the room. The bailiff stepped forward, placing a hand on his utility belt. Judge Thompson narrowed his eyes at the sudden interruption. "Who are you, and why are you disrupting my courtroom?" the judge demanded sternly. "I am Susan Caldwell, Your Honor," she stated. Her voice trembled with manufactured grief. "I am Jason's mother, but I cannot sit here and remain silent any longer. I cannot watch him lie to this court and destroy this innocent family." Jason whipped his head around. His eyes widened in absolute shock. He stared at his mother as if she had just grown a second head. "Mom!" Jason hissed frantically. "Sit down and shut your mouth right now." Susan completely ignored him. She took a step out into the aisle. She pressed her hands together in a pleading gesture toward the judge. "You must believe me, Your Honor," Susan sobbed, forcing wet tears down her cheeks. "I had absolutely no idea about the depth of his depravity. I did not know about the stolen military software. I did not know he was targeting a federal intelligence officer. I am just a frightened elderly woman. He manipulated me. He forced me to participate in his schemes against my will." Jason violently jerked against the steel handcuffs. The federal agents instantly clamped their heavy hands onto his shoulders, pinning him firmly to the wooden chair. "You traitor!" Jason screamed at the top of his lungs. "You stole my money! You embezzled from my company accounts! You are the one who ruined everything!" "I am the victim here!" Susan yelled back, pointing an accusing finger at her own son. "He is a monster, Your Honor. He has been lying to this court from the very beginning. He fabricated his entire financial portfolio. He deliberately hid his wealth so he would not have to pay Clara a single dime in child support. He laughed about it. He bragged about starving his own son out of spite." The judge leaned forward. His expression darkened even further. Are you confessing to possessing knowledge of systemic financial fraud regarding child support obligations? Ms. Caldwell, the judge asked. His voice was dangerously calm. Yes, Your Honor, Susan cried. But I only know about it because he forced me to hide the evidence. I can prove everything. I can hand over the exact proof you need to lock him away for years. I just need you to grant me full legal immunity. If you promise to protect me from federal prosecution, I will give you the physical hard drives. Jason's face turned a sickly shade of purple. The veins in his neck bulged. He thrashed against the agents holding him down. You miserable parasitic witch, Jason roared, spewing absolute venom at his mother. I gave you everything. I bought your house. I paid off your debts. You are going to burn in a federal prison right next to me. I will make sure they lock you in a cage for the rest of your miserable life. The judge slammed his gavel again, demanding order. Susan ignored the noise. She took another step down the aisle. Her eyes were fixed solely on the judge. The hard drives contain the dual accounting ledgers, Your Honor, Susan pleaded. They show the real corporate profits. They show the hidden offshore accounts. They prove he falsified his tax returns and his family court financial affidavits. I have them locked away in a secure safe at my house. Grant me immunity, and I will drive you there right now. The courtroom held its collective breath. Susan stood in the aisle, panting heavily. She believed she had just played her ultimate trump card. She believed she had successfully thrown her golden child to the wolves to save her own skin. I kept my eyes firmly locked directly on hers. You checked an entirely empty metal box hidden under your bedroom rug, Susan, I stated coldly. The hard drives are not in your floor safe. I know exactly where they are right now. I confiscated them exactly a week ago. Susan collapsed onto the wooden pew. The breath completely left her lungs in a loud, hollow wheeze. She stared at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The illusion of her grand rescue mission had just evaporated into thin air. She had tried to sacrifice her own son to save her luxurious lifestyle. But she was too late. I had already dismantled her safety net long before she even knew she was falling. She slowly lowered her face into her trembling hands. A loud, pathetic wail echoed from the back of the gallery. She was mourning herself. Jason stopped thrashing. The sheer weight of my words slammed into his chest like a physical blow. He froze in the wooden chair. His chest heaved up and down. The blood from his nose dripped onto his ruined collar. He stared at his mother, weeping in the back row. He stared at the federal agents standing like stone statues behind him. He looked at the judge, who was watching him with absolute disgust. The walls of his meticulously crafted empire were not just crumbling. They were being pulverized into dust. He had absolutely nothing left. Then something inside Jason completely snapped. The last remaining shred of his sanity fractured under the immense crushing pressure. He let out a primal, guttural scream. The sound tore through the quiet courtroom. It was a sound of unadulterated madness. I am a chief executive officer, Jason roared. He jerked violently against the steel handcuffs. The sharp metal bit deeply into his wrists, drawing fresh blood. He ignored the pain. His eyes were wild and bloodshot. I am a chief executive officer. I am the head of a massive technology empire. I am a chief executive officer. You cannot touch me. None of you can touch me. The two federal agents tightened their grip on his shoulders, forcing him back down into the chair. Jason thrashed his legs, kicking at the heavy oak defense table. I hold a $20 million defense contract, Jason screamed, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. I am a vital asset to the national security of this country. I am a vital asset. I am untouchable. Do you hear me? I am untouchable. You are all microscopic parasites feeding off my brilliance. I built my company from the ground up. I created revolutionary targeting software. The military needs my brain. The government needs my software. You cannot lock me in a cage. I am a powerful man. I am a powerful man. I am a powerful man. His repetitive chanting filled the room with an unsettling energy. He was desperately trying to speak his delusions into reality. He honestly believed that repeating his fabricated status would somehow magically erase the federal agents standing right behind him. He believed his money and his stolen power made him immune to the law. Judge Thompson raised his gavel again. "Mr. Caldwell, you will cease this outburst immediately," the judge ordered. Jason ignored the judge entirely. His wild, frantic eyes locked onto me. He leaned forward as far as the federal agents would allow. A twisted, malicious sneer spread across his bloody face. He directed all of his venom, all of his hatred straight at me. "You think you have won," Jason spat. Saliva flew from his mouth and landed on the polished wood table. "You think you are some kind of brilliant tactical genius? You are nothing, Clara. You are absolutely nothing. Look at yourself. Look at what you really are. You are a bitter, broken cripple. You are a defective soldier who could not even handle a simple combat deployment." I sat perfectly still. My expression remained entirely neutral. I did not blink. I did not flinch. I just let him dig his grave deeper. "You are a fraud." Jason continued, his voice dripping with absolute contempt. "You are a disabled ex-wife holding on to a pathetic grudge because I moved on to better things. You are jealous of my success. You are jealous of my new life. You are a bitter disabled ex-wife. You are a bitter disabled ex-wife. That is all you will ever be. You are going to spend the rest of your miserable life limping around a tiny apartment crying about the man who left you behind." He paused, gasping for breath. The crimson stain on his shirt grew larger. He smiled a terrifying, unhinged smile. "And you will never take Mason away from me," Jason declared. "You will never take my son. I will drag this custody battle through every single appellate court in this country. I will spend every dime I have to destroy you. You are an unfit mother. You are a psychological wreck. No judge in their right mind would ever hand a child over to a violent, unstable cripple. Mason belongs to me. He is my property. He is my son. You will never take him." The courtroom was dead silent. The only sound was the heavy, ragged breathing of the cornered rat sitting at the defense table. The high-priced attorney looked completely horrified. The bailiff stood frozen in shock. The federal agents remained locked in position, waiting for the command to remove the hostile suspect. Judge Thompson stared at Jason with a mixture of pity and severe condemnation. Jason was entirely out of moves. His money was gone. His defense contract was a sham. His mother had betrayed him. His fiancée had confessed to wire fraud. He was sitting in federal handcuffs, yet he still believed his insults held power. He still believed he could win through sheer intimidation. I placed my hands flat on the table. I pushed my chair back. I stood up slowly. I reached down and calmly buttoned my suit jacket. I stepped out from behind the table. I walked directly to the center of the courtroom. I looked directly at Jason. I prepared to deliver the final blow. My heels striking the hardwood floor echoed like a metronome. I moved with absolute precision. Every pair of eyes tracked my progress. The chaotic energy evaporated instantly. I projected absolute authority. I stopped squarely in the center of the room. I stood between the bench and the defense table, where Jason sat trembling in his federal restraints. Jason tried desperately to maintain his arrogant facade. He curled his bleeding lip. The violent shaking in his shoulders betrayed his escalating panic. He looked like a trapped rat, realizing the cage possessed no exits. He had constructed a fortress of expensive lies. Now the walls turned to dust. I did not ever shout aloud. True power never requires screaming. True power only requires the unvarnished truth. "Your Honor," I began, my voice carrying clearly and calmly across the vast silent space. "For the past 2 months, this man has funded a massive public relations campaign designed to completely destroy my character. He bought sleazy tabloid articles. He paid anonymous online commentators. He utilized his considerable corporate wealth to paint me as an unstable, aggressive reject." I turned my head slowly. I directed my gaze entirely onto Jason. He visibly flinched, pressing his back hard against his wooden chair. The 2 federal agents standing behind him shifted their weight, ensuring he could not retreat any further. He stood in this courtroom and called me a bitter, disabled ex-wife. I continued, refusing to break eye contact with the man who had tried to ruin me. He claimed I was dishonorably discharged for gross insubordination and unprovoked physical violence against my superiors. He built his entire aggressive custody strategy on the completely fabricated premise that I am a psychological ticking time bomb, unfit to raise our own son. He told this court my injuries were a sign of weakness. I pivoted back to face the judge. Judge Thompson sat perfectly still. His hands were folded reverently over the classified dossier. As you have just read in my unredacted federal file, that entire narrative is a complete and utter fabrication, I stated firmly. I was never dishonorably discharged from the military. I was medically retired. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery behind me. Susan let out a sharp, strangled wheeze. Rachel sat completely silently, her eyes shining with fierce, vindicated pride. I took one deliberate step closer to the defense table. I wanted Jason to hear every single syllable clearly. I wanted the reality of his miscalculation to crush him completely. I served 14 consecutive years in the United States military. I declared, my voice ringing with undeniable pride. For my final 6 years of active duty, I operated as a Special Operations Commander. Jason's mouth fell open. His eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for someone to contradict me. No one moved. No one spoke. The absolute truth was written on the classified paper resting on the judge's desk. The gross insubordination Jason so gleefully leaked to the press was actually a direct battlefield refusal to abandon a compromised diplomatic convoy in a highly hostile sector, I explained. The physical violence he claimed made me a monster was hand-to-hand combat against armed insurgents. 4 years ago, my specialized unit was assigned to protect a visiting ambassador during a highly volatile extractions protocol in an active war zone. Our convoy was ambushed. We took heavy immediate casualties. The vehicle carrying the ambassador was struck and disabled. I kept my eyes locked on Jason. I watched the last remaining drops of blood drain entirely from his face. I pulled the ambassador out of a burning armored vehicle. I continued, my tone unwavering. I sustained severe physical injuries during the subsequent firefight while personally securing our exfiltration route. The noticeable limp Jason so happily mocks the physical disability he claims makes me weak and pathetic is the direct result of taking enemy shrapnel to my left femur while dragging an American diplomat to safety. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning vents. The high-priced family attorney beside Jason looked physically sick. He stared at his client with pure, unadulterated horror, realizing he had spent months attacking a decorated war hero based on a narcissist's lies. I spent 9 agonizing months in a secure military hospital learning how to walk again, I stated calmly. I was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action. I was medically retired with full honors. Jason sat completely paralyzed in his heavy wooden chair, unable to speak or move. The arrogant technology executive who honestly believed he could purchase his own reality was staring at a ghost. He had believed his own expensive lies. He genuinely thought because I kept my service record highly classified to protect my family, I was hiding something shameful. He mistook my mandated operational security for cowardice. He thought my silence was weakness. He never possessed the mental capacity to realize my silence was mandated by federal law. Judge Thompson looked down at the documents, his expression filled with profound, solemn reverence. He slowly removed his reading glasses. He nodded at me, a deep, respectful gesture, acknowledging the immense weight of my sacrifice. Even the hardened federal agents standing behind Jason seemed to shift their posture to stand a little taller in my presence. I smoothed the front of my tailored suit jacket. The final nail in the coffin was ready. But my service to this country did not end when I surrendered my military uniform, I said quietly. I looked at Jason, watching his eyes dilate in absolute terror. You assumed I was completely unemployed, I stated. You assumed I was a pathetic housewife clinging to your corporate money. You thought you could financially starve me into surrendering our son. You were wrong. I did not remain unemployed, Jason. I transitioned into a new, highly classified operational role. I am the newly appointed Director of Cyber Intelligence for the United States Department of Defense. I watched the color drain from Jason's face. His facade shattered into a million pieces. The chief executive officer who spent the last hour screaming about his untouchable status looked like a terrified boy. He gripped the defense table until his knuckles turned white. He opened his mouth, but only a strangled wheezing emerged. The reality of my words paralyzed his vocal cords. I took another step toward him. My cane tapped sharply against the hardwood floor. The sound echoed like a clock counting down the final seconds of his freedom. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to shout to command absolute authority. I am the director of the Department of Defense Contract Audit Agency, I stated, emphasizing every single syllable. My jurisdiction covers every federal defense contractor operating within the United States. I hold a Level 6 security clearance. I report directly to the Secretary of Defense. I possess the authority to freeze, seize, and dismantle any corporate entity found guilty of defrauding the military. No, Jason stammered. His voice was weak. It shook with a pathetic vibration. That is impossible. You are lying. You are trying to scare me. You cannot hold that position. I stared him down. I let the silence suffocate his pathetic denial. His attorney pushed his chair away, distancing himself from his radioactive client. The lawyer refused to make eye contact with Jason. The lawyer already knew the truth. He saw the unredacted dossier resting on the judge bench. You thought you were incredibly clever, Jason. I continued, keeping my eyes locked onto his terrified face. You believed you were the smartest man in any room you walked into. You secured a massive $20 million defense contract to develop specialized targeting software for our forces. You paraded around corporate galas bragging about your contribution to national security. You threw ridiculous parties to celebrate your supposed genius. But you never developed a single line of working code, did you? You stole open-source software, patched it together with cheap offshore labor, and slapped a classified label on it. You endangered American soldiers just to line your greedy pockets. Jason shook his head back and forth. His breathing became shallow and erratic. The federal agents standing behind him tightened their grip on his shoulders, preparing for him to bolt. He had nowhere to go. The handcuffs clinked against the heavy oak table. You are insane, Jason gasped, desperately trying to salvage his ruined narrative. I built that software. My engineers built that software. You have no proof. You are just a bitter ex-wife trying to ruin my reputation. I am the exact federal official assigned to audit your fraudulent $20 million defense contract. I declared, my voice slicing through his lies like a razor-sharp knife. I have been investigating you and your corrupt executive board for 6 straight months. I have tracked every wire transfer. I have documented every offshore bank account in the Cayman Islands. I dismantled your fraudulent empire piece by piece while you were busy picking out flower arrangements for your wedding with Madison. Jason's face turned a pale green. The sweat poured down his forehead, stinging his eyes. He squeezed his eyes shut as if trying to wake up from a horrific nightmare. You knew the federal government was closing in on you, I stated, walking slowly along the railing of the jury box. You received the initial audit notification letter 3 months ago. You panicked. You needed a distraction. You needed something loud and chaotic to draw attention away from your failing company and your missing millions. So you decided to launch a vicious custody battle against me. You dragged me into this court to create a smokescreen. You believed that if you painted me as an unstable, aggressive, disabled veteran, the federal investigators would discount my credibility. You thought you could discredit the lead auditor by destroying her personal reputation in a family court. I turned to face him. The contempt I felt for this man radiated from every pore in my body. He tried to weaponize my military service. He tried to break me to cover up his own pathetic greed. You used our child as a human shield, Jason, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. You tried to rip Mason away from his mother just to buy yourself a few extra weeks of freedom. You dragged your mother into this courtroom and forced her to lie under oath. You allowed Madison to commit federal wire fraud to hide your stolen assets. You destroyed everyone around you because you are a coward. You are nothing but a weak, greedy coward who thought he could outsmart the United States military. Judge Thompson leaned forward over his high wooden bench. His expression was devoid of any mercy. The judge looked at Jason like he was observing a disgusting insect. Mr. Caldwell, Judge Thompson said, his deep voice booming with absolute final authority. The federal indictment against you contains 47 separate counts of wire fraud, treason, corporate espionage, and systemic embezzlement of federal funds. The family court matters regarding your son are effectively terminated. You are unfit to govern your own life, let alone the life of a minor child. Jason slumped forward in his wooden chair. All the fight drained out of his body. He looked at the floor, broken and defeated. The billionaire chief executive officer persona was gone. The abuser was dead. He lost his company. He had nothing left in this world. I turned away from the pathetic shell of the man I used to be married to. I looked toward the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom. The time for talking was over. The time for absolute justice had finally arrived. I raised my right hand into the air. I looked directly at the tactical team waiting in the shadows. I signaled the federal agents at the back of the room. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a resounding crash. 4 additional federal agents strode down the center aisle. They moved with terrifying synchronized precision. They wore dark tactical gear bearing the insignia of the Department of Defense. The 2 agents who had been standing directly behind Jason moved instantly. They seized his arms with uncompromising force. They hoisted him out of the wooden chair. Jason did not struggle. His legs turned to absolute jelly. His expensive designer suit crumpled as they slammed him face first against the polished surface of the defense table. The sharp metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs echoing through the silent courtroom sounded like a gunshot. The physical reality of his arrest finally registered in his panicked brain. "Your reign is officially over, Jason," I announced, walking slowly toward him. "The $20 million empire you thought made you untouchable is currently being dismantled brick by brick. At this exact second, federal tactical teams are executing synchronized raid warrants across your entire corporate headquarters. They are seizing your servers. They are confiscating your encrypted hard drives. The Department of the Treasury has already frozen every single one of your domestic and international bank accounts. Your luxury vehicles are being impounded. Your corporate assets are being liquidated to pay back the American taxpayers you so brazenly defrauded. You are not a chief executive officer anymore. You are a federal inmate with a designated serial number." Jason pressed his bleeding cheek against the cold wood of the table. He squeezed his eyes shut. A pathetic whimper escaped his throat. His high-priced attorney took 3 deliberate steps away from the table, completely abandoning his client. The lawyer frantically stuffed his legal pads into his briefcase, desperate to distance himself from the radioactive fallout. In the gallery behind the defense table, Madison realized the absolute finality of the situation. She saw Jason pinned to the table. She saw the tactical agents securing the room. Her eyes darted wildly around the space, searching for an exit. She slowly slid out of the wooden pew. She kept her head down, hoping the chaos would camouflage her retreat. She took 2 quiet steps toward the side aisle, attempting to sneak out the back door. "Agent Miller," I said, projecting my voice across the room, "please secure the fleeing accomplice." A tall female federal agent immediately stepped directly into the aisle, blocking Madison from taking another step. Madison gasped and stumbled backward. She clutched her expensive designer handbag against her chest like a shield. "You cannot touch me!" Madison shrieked, her voice pitching into a hysterical whine. "I did not do anything wrong. I am just his fiancée. I am a victim here. He lied to me too." Agent Miller grabbed Madison by the wrist and swiftly spun her around. The agent secured her hands tightly behind her back with a pair of steel cuffs. Madison screamed in shock as the metal bit into her skin. "You forfeited your victim status the moment you willingly participated in a federal crime," I stated, staring at her struggling form. "You stood in this very courtroom exactly 1 hour ago and proudly confessed to funneling Jason assets into hidden offshore accounts to hide them from a family court judge. You admitted on the official public record that you helped him conceal his wealth. That wealth belonged to the United States military. You willingly engaged in international wire fraud. You aided and abetted a traitor. You are going to federal prison right alongside him, Madison." Madison collapsed to her knees, weeping hysterically. The agent hauled her back to her feet by her arms, forcing her to stand and face the consequences of her profound greed. Judge Thompson struck his wooden gavel against the sounding block. The sharp noise instantly silenced Madison, pathetic sobbing. The judge glared down at the defense table with absolute unrestrained fury. "Bring the prisoner to his feet," Judge Thompson commanded. The agents hauled Jason upright. His face was smeared with blood and tears. His arrogant posture was completely gone. He slouched between the federal officers, looking like a terrified, broken child. "Jason Caldwell," Judge Thompson declared, his voice thundering through the courtroom. "I have presided over this court for 22 years. I have never encountered a man as profoundly vile, manipulative, and morally bankrupt as you. You utilized the sacred institution of the family court as a weapon to destroy an innocent, decorated veteran. You attempted to use your own flesh and blood as a pawn in a treasonous criminal conspiracy. You are a disgrace." The judge picked up his heavy gold pen. He pulled the final custody decree toward the center of his desk. "Based on the overwhelming, irrefutable evidence of your systemic criminal behavior, your impending federal incarceration, and your absolute moral unfitness, I am issuing my ruling immediately," Judge Thompson stated. "I hereby grant Clara full sole physical and legal custody of the minor child Mason. Furthermore, due to the extreme danger you pose to society and your complete disregard for the safety of your own family, I am permanently stripping you of all parental rights. You will never be permitted to contact, approach, or legally claim Mason again. You are entirely erased from his life." The judge signed his name across the document with violent, decisive strokes. He stamped the official court seal onto the paper. The custody battle was over. Mason was completely safe. Jason had lost everything. The federal agents gripped Jason by his arms and turned him toward the center aisle to begin his long walk to a prison cell. Jason stopped. He dug the heels of his expensive Italian leather shoes into the carpet, refusing to move. He looked directly at me. His arrogant sneer was completely eradicated. His eyes were bloodshot and overflowing with tears of absolute defeat. The reality of his complete destruction finally shattered his narcissistic delusions. "Clara, please," Jason begged, his voice cracking into a desperate, pathetic sob. "Please do not let them do this to me. I will give you whatever you want. I will sign anything. Just call them off. You are the only one who can stop this. Please have mercy on me. Please, Clara. I am begging you. Have mercy on me." I looked down at the pathetic man kneeling before me. Jason was sobbing uncontrollably. The steel handcuffs bound his wrists tightly behind his back. The federal agents gripped his shoulders with unyielding force. He was begging for mercy. He was offering to give me whatever I wanted. He was offering to sign anything I put in front of him. He thought he could still negotiate his way out of this total destruction. He thought his words still carried weight. They did not. I did not smile. I did not sneer. I felt absolutely no desire to gloat over his magnificent ruin. Gloating was an emotion reserved for the weak. I only felt a profound sense of absolute clarity. I stared into his terrified, bloodshot eyes. I watched the realization wash over his face. He finally understood that I was never the broken victim he wanted me to be. I was the architect of his spectacular downfall. "You abandoned us, Jason," I stated, my voice perfectly steady and devoid of any emotion. "You looked at your own infant son, and you decided he was an inconvenience. You looked at the woman who bled for this country, and you decided she was a liability. You walked away when we needed you the most. You threw us aside because you thought we would drag you down. You thought your stolen money and your fraudulent defense contracts made you a god. But you are just a thief. You are a small, insignificant thief who got caught. You abandoned your son when he needed you most. Now you are going to spend the next 20 years locked inside a tiny federal cell. You will sit in the dark, and you will realize the ultimate truth. Nobody will ever need you at all." Jason choked on his own breath. He squeezed his eyes shut as fresh tears spilled down his bruised cheeks. He tried to speak, but the federal agents yanked him upward by his arms. They dragged him away from the defense table. He stumbled over his own feet as they hauled him down the center aisle. He did not look back. He just kept sobbing. Madison was already gone. She had been dragged out the side door by Agent Miller, screaming obscenities until the heavy wood slammed shut behind her. Susan remained frozen in the back row. She was staring at the empty space where her golden child had just been standing. She had lost her house. She had lost her stolen money. She had lost her son. She was entirely alone. I turned my back on all of them. I looked up at Judge Thompson. He gave me a single respectful nod. He understood the magnitude of what had just occurred in his courtroom. Justice had been served with absolute precision. I gripped the handle of my cane. I turned and walked down the center aisle. My footsteps were steady and rhythmic. I did not rush. I took my time. The gallery remained perfectly silent as I passed. The high-priced lawyers stared at the floor. The bailiff held the gate open for me. I did not look at Susan as I walked past her pew. She ceased to exist in my world. I reached the back of the courtroom. The heavy double doors loomed in front of me. I pushed them open with one hand. The bright sunlight from the hallway instantly washed over me. The air outside the courtroom felt incredibly clean. I stepped out onto the polished marble floor. Jamal and Rachel were standing near the tall arched windows. Jamal was wearing his dress uniform. Rachel was standing tall with a fierce, proud smile on her face. Jamal was holding little Mason in his strong arms. Mason was wearing a tiny blue suit. He had a bright yellow toy truck clutched in his hand. When Mason saw me, he immediately dropped the truck. He let out a loud, happy squeal. Mama Mason shouted. Jamal gently set him down on the marble floor. Mason ran toward me as fast as his little legs could carry him. His arms were stretched out wide. I dropped my cane. I did not need it right now. I knelt down on the hard floor. I caught my son in my arms. I pulled him tightly against my chest. He smelled like baby shampoo and sunshine. I buried my face in his soft hair. He wrapped his tiny arms around my neck. I stood back up, lifting him effortlessly. I rested him on my hip. He patted my cheek with his warm hand. He was safe. He was completely safe. Nobody would ever threaten him again. Nobody would ever try to tear him away from me. I looked at Jamal and Rachel. "We did it," I said quietly. Jamal smiled, wrapping his arm around Rachel. "You did it," Clara Jamal corrected. "You took down the whole empire." I looked back at the closed courtroom doors. Behind those heavy wooden panels lay the absolute ruin of Jason Caldwell. His money was seized. His company was dismantled. His freedom was gone. He was facing decades in federal prison. I had delivered the exact justice he deserved. I turned away from the doors. I shifted Mason weight on my hip. I picked up my cane. "Let us go home," I said. We walked down the long, bright hallway together. The sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating our path. I held my head high. I felt the comforting weight of my son in my arms. I felt the solid presence of my true family walking right beside me. I left the betrayers behind to face their complete and utterly justified destruction. There were absolutely no tears falling from my eyes. There was absolutely no sadness lingering in my heart. There was no regret for the choices I had made to protect us. There was only absolute total victory. I stepped out of the courthouse and into the bright, beautiful day.